They say every corporate revenge story starts with a hero who was underestimated. Mine starts with something simpler. I was invisible, not in a dramatic, no one sees my worth way. In a literal day-to-day way. People forgot my name in meetings. Somebody once handed me their coat during a fire drill, thinking I worked building security. HR emailed me twice, reminding me to complete the intern onboarding, even though I'd been there 8 months. But the thing about being invisible is that people talk freely around you. They show you who they really are because they think it doesn't matter if you hear them. That is how I learned the truth about my manager, Ethan. He wasn't the loud tyrant type. He wasn't the throw papers scream in your face kind either. He was worse, the kind who smiled at executives while quietly making sure no one below him got credit for anything. He had turned selective visibility into a leadership style. If something succeeded, it was his. If it failed, he had an intern. Me? He didn't even try to hide it. During one of our weekly check-ins, always scheduled for 7:50 a.m., 10 minutes before his first meeting, he looked at the reconciliation I built over 3 nights and said, "Perfect. I'll walk the directors through this. You stay close to your desk in case I need you." He needed me, all right? He needed me to stay out of sight. I remember walking back to my cubicle that day, the cheap office carpet swallowing every step. I told myself I didn't mind. Everyone starts somewhere. Maybe this was my paying dues phase. Maybe being underestimated was normal in finance operations. And for a while, I believed that. I liked the work itself. The numbers made sense. Vendor flags, cash flow patterns, mismatched statements. None of it cared whether you were an intern or a VP. It just required attention, and attention was something I could give endlessly. But people? People were different. The first real crack happened during a team lunch. We were sitting in the corner of a crowded deli, the kind with laminated menus and a constant hum of orders being yelled across the counter. Ethan arrived 10 minutes late, sunglasses still on, holding his phone like a trophy. "Sorry, folks, had to put out a fire," he announced. Then he waved his hand toward me. "Intern handled most of it, though," he said, even though the fire was actually his billing error that I'd fixed at 1:30 a.m. Someone laughed. Someone asked if I got extra credit for that. Ethan chuckled. "Let's not spoil him. Interns who feel important start asking for raises." He said it casually, like small talk, like weather. I remember feeling the air leave my chest, not because it hurt, but because of how normal it felt to everyone else. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about paying dues. This was a system, a hierarchy held together by silence, convenience, and people like me doing work nobody bothered to understand. Still, I stayed quiet, careful, focused, because at that point I believed the story everyone told me, that hard work eventually speaks for itself. It doesn't, not in places where the wrong people hold the microphone. The second crack came a few weeks later. It was late, past 9 p.m., and the office was almost empty. Those fluorescent lights that always hummed during the day now sounded louder, like they were reminding me I didn't belong here after hours. Ethan walked by my desk, jacket slung over his shoulder. "Don't stay too long," he said. "You'll make the rest of us look bad." I forced a smile. "Just finishing the vendor audit." He paused. "Oh, right. That's due tomorrow morning. Send me the clean version. I'll put my notes on it." His notes, meaning he'd remove my name again. But that wasn't what got to me. What got to me was how he never asked why I was there that late. Never asked if I had dinner plans, or if I was okay, or if the workload was manageable. I was a function to him, a nameless extension of his job title. That night, as I worked through the last mismatched line, something happened that didn't seem important at the time. A vendor statement didn't add up. Not by a rounding error, not by a formatting glitch, by millions. At first, I assumed it was a reconciliation delay, or a misplaced entry, or maybe I was just too tired to see the simple explanation. But I left a note in my draft. Check against Ethan's master file. Vendor number 7416 discrepancy. The next morning, that note was gone from the final version he presented to directors. He didn't mention it. He didn't ask. He didn't even acknowledge he'd seen it. He simply deleted it. I told myself it was an oversight. I told myself a lot of things. But the truth was already forming quietly in the back of my mind. Something was wrong. Something big. I just didn't know yet that the discrepancy I flagged that night, the one he erased, would crack open a sequence of events that would end with shareholders voting on him, and me standing in the room he always said I had no place being. But that was still far ahead, for now I was just the intern, invisible, watching, listening, and one late Tuesday night I was about to see the first shadow of the $8.4 million truth hiding behind Ethan's smile. I didn't go into the office the next morning planning to uncover anything. I wasn't a whistleblower. I wasn't a prodigy. I was a guy trying to keep his head down in a place where nobody cared whether he had one. But the thing about numbers is they don't care about hierarchy. They only care about truth. And that Tuesday, the truth started showing its teeth. It began with Ethan's revision. He sent me the final audit file at 8:12 a.m. with a short note. Cleaned up. Good work. I opened the document. My note about vendor 74 was gone. Every line item was untouched, except that one. He had cleared the discrepancy completely, as if it didn't exist. At first, I assumed he had fixed it himself. Maybe he'd found the missing entry, or the vendor sent an update overnight. That was the generous explanation, the version of Ethan I wished existed. So I checked the vendor portal. No update. I checked the bank feed. No update. I checked the internal ticketing system. No mentions. The entry was still wrong, the same multi-million variance. Only now, in our official audit, that variance had been erased. That was the moment irritation began replacing confusion. Not anger, yet. Just a slow, steady irritation that comes from being treated like someone who won't notice. I walked to Ethan's office. He always kept the door slightly open, enough for people to believe he was approachable without actually being so. He was typing something quickly, the kind of, I'm extremely busy. Typing that managers perform when they want credit for pressure. Morning, I said. He didn't look up. What's up? I saw the final audit. Just wanted to check on vendor 7416. The discrepancy's still showing in the system. Did they send corrected numbers? He paused. Just half a second, but that half second changed everything. Then he leaned back, gave me a polite, leadership-approved smile. It was a reconciliation delay. Already handled. Don't worry about it. It was too smooth, too quick, too certain. Do you need me to update the vendor file? I asked. No, he said. I'll take care of it. Focus on your tasks. And with that, he dismissed me with his eyes before dismissing me with his words. I walked out, but something didn't sit right. Reconciliation delays leave traces. Emails, timestamps, portal updates. This one had none. And Ethan didn't handle vendor issues personally. Ever. He didn't even have portal access. He always asked me to pull statements. So how did he fix something he couldn't even view? My irritation grew into something sharper. But the day didn't slow down for my suspicions. Meetings, spreadsheets, more cleanup work that would appear under Ethan's name. The usual routine. Until lunchtime. People gathered in the break room, trying to pretend microwaved leftovers were a community event. Someone was talking about a March Madness bracket. Someone else complained about the air conditioning, just the background noise of corporate life. Then I heard Ethan's voice, loud enough to be heard by whoever he wanted to impress, quiet enough that he could claim he didn't realize anyone else was listening. Interns get overeager, he said. He found a vendor discrepancy and thought he'd discovered buried treasure. Had to clean it up before directors saw it. Someone laughed. Growing pains. Yeah, Ethan said. He's good with numbers, but you know how juniors are. They don't understand context. I stood by the fridge with my untouched lunch, each sentence tightening something inside me. He was lying. Not just minimizing me, not just taking credit. He was deleting evidence. and then mocking me for seeing what he didn't want seen. For the first time, I felt something heavier than irritation. Not anger. Anger is easy. This was disbelief mixed with a growing, undeniable clarity. He wasn't avoiding mistakes. He was hiding them. His confidence wasn't earned. It was built on curated silence, and I had been part of the curation. The rest of the day passed in a fog of calculation. I replayed his reaction, the missing note, the fake explanation, the laugh in the break room. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but when someone erases your work and the only red flag inside it, the conclusion starts walking toward you on its own. So I stayed late again, not because Ethan asked, he didn't even notice, but because something in me needed to see for myself. By 9:30 p.m., the office was empty. I pulled up Ethan's master file. It was password protected, which wasn't unusual. Managers often lock templates to prevent unauthorized edits. But Ethan had a habit of using variations of the same passwords. I'd seen him type them too many times. The fourth attempt unlocked it. I scrolled through the vendor section. The discrepancy was there. Not fixed, not corrected, but manually overwritten. A spreadsheet cell that should have pulled live numbers from the ledger had been broken and replaced with a static value. His static value. That alone was bad. But what made my stomach tighten was the note attached to the change. Override for presentation. Review later. Dated 3 months earlier. 3 months of masking a multi-million variance. Not a typo. Not a delay. Not a system glitch. A deliberate override. I leaned back in my chair. The hum of the office lights was louder at night, like static pressing against my thoughts. I wasn't supposed to see this. Ethan didn't expect me to look at the master file. Only he and directors were supposed to access it. But he underestimated one thing. Interns do the work no one else wants to understand. I understood. Too well now. Still, I knew better than to jump to accusations. Corporate life punishes the loud and protects the polished. Ethan could twist this in ways I hadn't even imagined, but I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. That night, irritation finally shifted into something clearer. Resolve. And as I sat there staring at the $8.4 million override hiding in plain sight, I felt that small, sharp shift inside me. The first fracture in the old version of myself. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I just stopped staying quiet. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear. Fear is sharp, fast, reactive. What I felt was slower. Something that settled in my chest like a weight I couldn't move. For months, maybe longer, I'd told myself that being overlooked was temporary, that Ethan's behavior was just office culture, that one day my work would speak for itself, like all those motivational posters promised. But now the truth sat in front of me in black and white. My work did speak, and Ethan's hand was on its mouth. The override he created wasn't a harmless shortcut. It wasn't a fix he planned to clean up later. It was a structural lie woven into our financials, a lie that had grown roots. $8.4 million, 3 months, presented to directors at least twice, signed off without question because Ethan was considered reliable. And me? I was the intern who didn't understand context. I arrived at the office Wednesday morning before anyone else. The building's security guard raised an eyebrow. 3rd day in a row, I'd beaten him to the coffee machine. I forced a smile. Audit week, I said. It wasn't a lie, just not all of the truth. When I reached my desk, I stared at my monitors without touching the keyboard. I kept seeing Ethan's handwritten note in that spreadsheet cell. Override for presentation. Review later. There was no later. There never had been. The override wasn't a temporary patch. It was a strategy. And now I needed one too. But first, I had to understand what I was dealing with because I knew this. If I made a wrong move, Ethan would crush me before anyone even listened. He had years of influence. I had a badge that still said intern. So I took the only reasonable first step. I started verifying the rest of his numbers. Not recklessly, not dramatically. Quietly, one vendor at a time. Vendor 2084, clean. Vendor 1103, clean. Vendor 9172, small mismatch but standard. Vendor 706, massive fake correction. I kept going. By noon, a pattern started forming. Ethan wasn't sloppy, he was selective. He didn't override every discrepancy, only the ones that made his performance metrics look worse. Anything that created volatility, even legitimate volatility, he patched manually. Anything that could trigger questions, he smoothed out. Anything that could affect his quarterly accuracy score, he buried. It wasn't embezzlement, it wasn't theft. It was something subtler and more common in corporate offices than people admit: performance fraud. He had been polishing his metrics for months, maybe years, by quietly altering the data he was supposed to manage. Not enough to raise alarms, just enough to look like the best performing manager in the division. And now, that carefully curated perfection had a hole big enough for a shareholder to drive a lawsuit through. But I wasn't ready to act. Not yet. Because in every corporate story I'd ever heard, the person who exposes something is punished long before the truth is celebrated. I needed everything airtight, documented, time-stamped, verified, and I needed someone who wasn't Ethan to know. The question was who? Directors trusted Ethan blindly. HR wouldn't understand financial models. The CFO only saw consolidated summaries, not raw files. I had access, but no authority. The answer finally came when I overheard a conversation near the printers. Two senior analysts were talking about the quarterly review. If Ethan's unit hits accuracy again, he's up for a promotion. Director level, they're impressed. Yeah, and his intern does half the work. Still counts. Numbers don't lie. I almost laughed. Numbers never lie, but people who control them do. I walked back to my desk, something inside me finally clicking into place. If Ethan got promoted, the override would disappear forever. He'd gain more access, more control, more people to hide behind, and I would stay invisible. No. That was the moment I felt the shift. Real, heavy, irreversible. I wasn't going to be part of that. Not anymore. Around 4 p.m., Ethan stopped by my desk. "Quick thing," he said, dropping a folder onto my keyboard. "Need you to prepare the vendor summary for tomorrow's leadership sync. Keep it simple. Directors hate details." I opened the folder. The summary he wanted was built on numbers I now knew were falsified. I looked up at him. His expression was neutral, confident, dismissive. He had no idea what I'd seen. No idea I'd already mapped the trail he thought was buried. "Sure," I said quietly. Because sometimes silence isn't submission. Sometimes silence is preparation. After he walked away, I took a breath and opened a blank sheet. I didn't build the summary he asked for. I built two. One with Ethan's clean numbers, the version he expected, and a second version with the real numbers, the one that showed the missing $8.4 million in every override leading to it. By 7 p.m., the office was empty again. My two summaries were saved, printed, time-stamped, and backed up to a personal drive that didn't sync with the company network, but I wasn't done. I needed someone who could validate what I found. Someone neutral. Someone with actual authority. My mind went through the organizational chart. Legal? Too early. HR? Pointless. Directors? Biased. The CFO? Unreachable without going through Ethan. Then I remembered something small, something that had meant nothing days ago. During one of our meetings, a senior financial controller from another division had visited our floor to review quarterly adjustments. He'd asked me to send him a breakdown because interns see everything managers forget. He had said it as a joke, but he'd given me his card. He wasn't in Ethan's chain of command. He had access to raw data, and most importantly, he owed Ethan nothing. At 7:23 p.m., hands shaking slightly, I typed a message. "Hi, Mark. Following up on Q2 vendor adjustments, found a significant variance in vendor 74 in skits that conflicts with reported data. Could use an outside verification if you have time tomorrow. Alex." I didn't mention Ethan. I didn't accuse anyone. I asked for verification. A simple, reasonable corporate request. I sent it. And for the first time since this began, I felt something steady rise inside me. Not fear, not anger. Alignment. The sense that my life had been off balance for months, maybe longer, and now something inside me was settling into its rightful place. I shut down my computer, packed my bag, and walked toward the elevator. The office was silent, but it felt different this time. Not empty. Expectant. Because that was the night I stopped being the person Ethan needed me to be, and I started becoming the person his lie couldn't survive. I woke up Thursday feeling like two versions of myself were walking inside the same body. One was still the intern, the kid who kept his voice down, who double-checked everything twice, who waited for permission to matter. The other was someone new, someone who knew a truth too big to stay quiet. And that tension followed me into the office. By 8 a.m., people were streaming in with coffees and headphones, the usual rhythm of routine. But under it, something felt off. I couldn't name it yet, just a pressure in the air, like the kind of heaviness before a storm breaks. At 8:14 a.m., my inbox pinged. A reply from Mark, the senior controller I had emailed the night before. Alex, available at 10:30. Bring source files. My throat tightened. He wasn't brushing me off. He wasn't forwarding me to Ethan. He wasn't ignoring the variance. He wanted to see it. In person. This wasn't normal. Controllers don't waste time on interns unless something's genuinely concerning, or unless they suspect the person above the intern isn't telling them the full truth. At 9:58 a.m., Ethan stopped by my desk. He looked energized, almost cocky. We have leadership sync at 11. Prep the summary for me? It's done, I said calmly. Good, he replied. Send me the clean version. He didn't have to specify which one he meant. I sent it, the version built on his doctored numbers. I needed him to believe I was compliant, unthreatening, predictable. Because at 10:30 I walked into Mark's office carrying the other version. His door was half open. He glanced up, motioned for me to close it, then gestured to the chair across from him. No small talk, no smiles, just numbers. Show me, he said. I opened my laptop, pulled up the vendor ledger, the override logs, Ethan's master file, the cell edits, the timestamps, the 3-month chain of corrected to look perfect data. Mark leaned closer as the pattern emerged. Override, override, override. Each one subtle, each one explainable on its own. But together, a fabrication. He didn't interrupt, didn't react, didn't even blink. He watched carefully, analytically, the way someone watches a building blueprint, before saying whether it will stand or collapse. When I finished, he sat back and exhaled slowly. This isn't a minor issue, he said. This affects quarterly reporting. I know. And the override trail? Intact, I said. He didn't expect anyone else to open the file. Mark stared at the screen for another long moment. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't angry. He was calculating, the way people do when they realize a problem is bigger than the person who brought it in. Leave all files with me, he said. Don't mention this to anyone. Not your manager, not your team. No one. I nodded. He typed something into his monitor. Then, I'm escalating this directly to the CFO. My pulse jumped. The CFO wasn't some corporate figurehead. She was sharp, detail-oriented, and famously allergic to manipulated data. For something to reach her desk, it had to be serious. This was serious. When I left Mark's office, I felt the hallway differently. The walls felt tighter. The quiet had a weight to it. Because now the information wasn't mine anymore. It was moving, and I had no control over where it would go next. At 11:02 a.m., Ethan called me into the leadership sync. Take notes, he said, handing me a pad of paper. Directors gathered around the table. Ethan opened the meeting with practiced confidence, the smile, the tone, the energy. He launched into updates about vendor stability, reconciliation accuracy, and his team's performance. I watched him speak. Calm, proud, polished. He was selling a story I now knew every line, of by heart. Around 11:18, the conference room door opened. The CFO walked in. Silence followed her like a shadow. She wasn't scheduled for this meeting. Directors shifted. Ethan straightened his posture and smiled wider, the kind of smile meant to win points. "Good morning," he said. "Didn't expect—" "Ethan," she said, "I need to discuss your reporting." The oxygen seemed to leave the room. He blinked. "Of course. We can review after—" "We'll review now." Her tone was steady, cold. She wasn't angry yet. She was certain. She placed a printed packet on the table. My packet. The real numbers. I felt my chest tighten. Ethan flipped through the pages. His face didn't change at first. Then the color drained slowly, like something inside him was evaporating. "These figures are incorrect," he said quickly. "Someone must have—" "The override logs," the CFO interrupted, "are clear." Directors leaned in. She pulled up a file on the screen. Mark must have sent her everything. Cell edits, manual entries, timestamps. Every override line. Ethan's overrides. "Do you want to explain," she said, "why multiple vendor variances were manually altered before quarterly reports?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at me, not with suspicion, not with anger, with recognition, the kind that says, "You saw what you weren't supposed to see." In that moment, something chaotic began unfolding, not loud, not dramatic, but internally catastrophic. The CFO continued. "Given the potential impact on reported metrics, I've escalated this matter to legal and compliance. I've already requested a shareholder review of Q2 financial accuracy." "A shareholder review? The nuclear option," directors whispered. Ethan's eyes darted. Toward the files, toward the screen, toward me. Then, "I need to speak with my team privately." "No," the CFO said. "You won't." He froze. "You will step out," she said. "Compliance is waiting." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Ethan stood slowly, not defiantly, weakly. He walked out of the room as if gravity had doubled. And for the first time since I started at that company, he didn't look like someone in control. He looked like someone whose story was ending. The door closed behind him. And in the room full of directors, screens and numbers, something inside me shifted again, cleaner, deeper, unmistakable. For months I had been invisible. Now, for the first time, every eye in the room turned toward me, not as the intern, not as the kid who carried the workload, as the person who saw the truth. And the CFO's final words before she ended the meeting hit with the clarity of a verdict. "We will need the original source files. Whoever prepared the initial audit, stay after." My hands were steady when I said, "That was me." The leadership meeting ended in a silence that felt nothing like fear. It felt like accuracy settling into place. The directors remained seated as the CFO closed her folder and gestured for me to follow her into an adjacent conference room. No one questioned why. No one questioned me. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. I wasn't an accessory to the story anymore. I was a source. When the door shut behind us, she motioned to a chair. "Start from the beginning," she said. "Everything you found. Every file." There was no accusation in her tone, but no warmth either. She spoke with the precision of a person used to walking into financial fires without flinching, and that steadiness almost steadied me too. For the next 25 minutes, I laid everything out. The vendor statement, the missing variants, Ethan's dismissive explanation, the deleted note, the override in the master file, the timestamps, the 3-month pattern, the 2 versions of the summary, my email to Mark. Nothing added, nothing dramatized, just data, numbers, facts. She asked sharp questions, technical ones, procedural ones, motive-based ones, all real, all logical, all questions any experienced executive would ask. And I answered every single one calmly. When we finished, she closed my folder and said the first human sentence of the entire meeting, "You did the right thing." Not warm, Not congratulatory, just true. Will this impact the company? I asked. It will impact a few people, she said. The company will be fine. A pause. Then, and you're not one of the people who should be worried. She stood, signaling the conversation was over. Return to your desk. Don't discuss this with anyone. You will be contacted. It wasn't reassurance, but it was enough. I left the room feeling not victorious, not proud, but clean. That's the best word for it. Clean. Like I'd been carrying something heavy that finally had a place to sit that wasn't my chest. But the day wasn't done. At 2:17 p.m., Ethan's name disappeared from the internal messaging system. By 2:40, his calendar was wiped. By 3:05, HR announced a leadership transition effective immediately. No details, no explanations, just a quiet erasure, the kind he used to perform on my work. Around 3:30, Mark stopped by my desk. He didn't say much, just nodded and said, "Good work." Then he walked away. But that nod carried something heavier than approval. It acknowledged presence. And that was a currency I had never been given in that building. An hour later, I received an email. Subject, meeting, tomorrow, 9:02 a.m., from CFO's office. My stomach tightened, but not in fear, in anticipation. I knew what this meant. Not the outcome, but the shift. Doors don't open suddenly in corporate life. They open when something breaks, and someone has the tools to fix it. The next morning, I walked into the CFO's office. Not the conference room, not the hallway outside it. Her office. The assistant offered me coffee. That alone felt surreal. The CFO didn't waste time. "We've reviewed your work and your documentation," she said. Legal completed their assessment. The board was briefed last night. She folded her hands. The shareholders will hold a vote regarding the accuracy violations. Ethan will not be part of the decision-making process. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. "You handled this responsibly," she continued, quietly, thoroughly, and without trying to leverage it for personal gain. I nodded. It wasn't about leverage. "That," she said, "is exactly why this conversation is happening." She slid a small folder across the table. Inside was an offer letter, a full-time position, financial operations analyst, my own responsibilities, my own projects, my own name on audits, better salary, better path, better future. "This isn't a reward," she said. "This is a correction." I felt something warm rise in my chest. Not excitement, not pride. Something simpler. Relief. Relief that someone finally saw me without Ethan standing between us. I signed the offer. When I left her office, the floor felt different. People nodded at me with a type of acknowledgement I'd never seen before. Not admiration, respect. The kind that comes when people realize you weren't invisible. They just weren't looking. Over the next week, the shareholder review confirmed everything. Ethan resigned before they could vote. Officially, it was to pursue new opportunities. Unofficially, everyone knew. No drama, no scene, no revenge fantasy, just consequences delivered by the numbers he thought he could bend forever. On my last day as the intern, I cleaned out my desk, not in shame, not in defeat, but in transition. I placed my badge on the table and picked up the new one HR left in an envelope. Alexander Ward, Financial Operations. Analyst, not intern. Not junior support. Not a ghost in someone else's story. It felt like oxygen. When I reached the elevator, I looked back at my old cubicle one last time. The cheap carpet, the flickering light, the desk where I'd spent months being the person everyone overlooked. And I realized something simple. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Ethan. Not at the directors. Not at myself. The truth had done what the truth always does. It found the one person who couldn't outrun it. And as I stepped onto the elevator with my new badge and a future finally shaped by my own work, one quiet thought settled in my mind. They mocked me as just an intern, but numbers don't mock. Numbers remember. And this time, they remembered me.